Hello everyone. My name is Megan Belfield and I am an AmeriCorps Vista, which stands for Volunteer in Service to America. And I work with Be Mighty Little Rock, and today we will be celebrating the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr. Be Mighty Little Rock is an anti-hunger campaign that offers free after-school and weekend meals for kids 18 and younger. We work directly with the Central Arkansas Library System, actually. I will be moderating our public service panel today. And to start off, I will introduce each of our panelists, and then we will jump straight into the conversation. And if we have time remaining, we will try to answer some live questions. So starting with Senator Joyce Elliott, State Senator Joyce Elliott represents Senate District 31, comprising parts of Little Rock and Pulaski County. She was elected to the Senate in 2008 after having served 3 terms in the House of Representatives from 2001 through 2006. For 30 years, Elliott taught high school juniors and seniors advanced placement and standard courses. She has taught in Florida, Minnesota, and Texas. And in 2004, Senator Elliott left the classroom and began working for the College Board, focusing on expanding access to AP classes for students currently underrepresented. Senator Elliott has been active in the Democratic Party at local, state, and national level, having served as vice chairman of the Democratic Party of Arkansas, a member of the Democratic National Committee, and its Resolution Committee. I want to say personally thank you to Senator Elliott for your service. Next, we have Dr. Jay Barth, who is the Chief Education Officer for the City of Little Rock, coordinating the city's work to support education from birth through higher education, with a particular focus on implementing the community school model and collaborating with the Little Rock School District. He is an M.E. and Emma Graves Peace Distinguished Professor of Politics at Hendrix College. Barth has chaired the Board of Education Advocates for Children and Families, the Arkansas Single Parent Scholarship Fund, Just Committees of Arkansas, the American Civil Liberties Unions of Arkansas, the Single Parent Scholarship Fund of Pulaski County, and was a 12-year member of the board of the American Civil Liberty Union. Dr. Barth, thank you for your service. Following Dr. Barth are the co-directors of the Ouachita Foothill Youth and Media Art and Literacy Collective and the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement, Clarice and Kwami Abdul-Bey. As a lifelong youth mentor and youth advocate, Clarice is ardent about coaching students in the areas of solution-based journalism, interviewing skills, and what she likes to call active empathetic listening techniques. She is a racial justice facilitator, mental health first aider, and a mindfulness relationship practitioner. Passionate about wellness, integration in workspaces, advocacy, and social justice issues, she and her husband are also the co-host of Jadestone Vintage Soul on KABF 88.3 FM Community Radio, along with their 5-year-old son. Kwami is the grandnephew of Lonnie Dixon, a Little Rock teenager executed in 1927 without due process and without equal protection after being convicted, without any physical evidence of murdering Floella McDonald, a white girl. The true significance of this familial relationship was awakened during his visit to the Equal Justice Initiative Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice with his wife, Clarice. As a result, Clarice and Kwami co-founded the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement immediately upon their return home, with the goal of creating the environment where the 492 plus documented victims of historical racialized violence in the state of Arkansas could be properly memorialized. Their work has led to the founding of the Central Arkansas chapter of Coming to the Table and the inaugural observation of the National Day of Racial Healing in the state of Arkansas in 2020. Kwami and Clarice, we thank you for your service. We're excited to have everyone today, and I am very thankful that you guys all decided to participate. So I want to start off our first question directed to all of the panelists, which is a 2-part question. What inspired you to choose your career path, and what made you want to go into public service? We will start with you, Senator Elliott.
For some reason, I'm unable to turn on my camera, but I will. Can you help?
We'll try to get that fixed.
Okay. Well, I will go right ahead and answer your question. Um, I I decided when I was a youngster that I wanted to be a teacher, and a part of that was growing up in a way where, like so many Arkansans, we were poor, and I was always so taken by people who said we were poor, but we didn't know it. I thought that was just such a cute thing because we were and we knew it. But the one big thing that was such an outlet for me was um, for school. I loved school. I loved learning, and I just loved my teachers. And to me, being a teacher was such a fabulous thing to do. That's the way you help. I think have such an influence on the future for a very long time by preparing young people to be a part of writing their own future and not having to just depend on somebody else to do so if they have the learning they need that empowers them. And so when I decided after I got out of college, just in case I didn't teach, I prepared myself that I wanted to be a broadcaster. And to me, that in a foreign country, by the way, and to me that only meant Paris. When I talked about foreign countries, it only meant Paris. And so I took French and did all the things I needed to do with a double major to be sure I could do that as well. But when it came down to it, Megan, I had to decide which one of these careers that I felt confident about doing makes the most sense. Which one gives you an opportunity to contribute the most to humanity? And I just did that side by side thing. And, about 2 issues in, I knew teaching was what I was supposed to do, and I was right. I got a chance to do exactly what I wanted to do with my life as a teacher, which also was public service. And I had gone through, by the time I was teaching school integration, that was not the best experience. And by then, I wanted to be a teacher for every student. I wanted to be the teacher I did not have after I had left the segregated school and gone to the integrated school, where it was not the most welcoming place. And the thing that got me into politics, this part of my public service, was I was around 10 years old, and I saw how John F. Kennedy, to make a long story short, because I was just a precocious 10-year-old that read the news, and I always would talk with my grandmother about what's going on, and I saw people who were beaten down by the way Black people were treated in the South. And when John F. Kennedy was running, I was obsessed with that. That was the first time and last time I've ever been thrown out of my class because we were studying long division. I'd already figured out how to do that, and I was bugging the teacher about why can't we talk about the Kennedy-Nixon debate? So that got me thrown out of class because I was disrupting. But because I saw the impact we had, even then as a kid, I just said, to myself, I don't know what this is called because I don't think I knew the word politics. I don't know what this is called, but I want to do this, and I will do it someday. And that's just a promise I kept to myself. So that's how I ended up where I am.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your response. Dr. Barth, do you mind answering following up?
Yeah, interestingly, first off, thank you so much for including me today, and so great to see everyone else. My path to public service is weirdly not that different from Joyce's. I think we both had particularly special relationships with our grandparents, and I saw my grandmother and grandfather in particular, doing really good community-based public work when I was a kid. It was just kind of a part of their life, and I saw the value they gained from that in terms of the bonds they built with others, the authentic connections they built with others through that service, and I was very, very drawn to that. I did fall in love with politics at a very early age, not unlike Joyce, and I remember how important that was to me as a kid. And I also, of course, went towards the pathway of teaching, and it was for several reasons. I think first off, because I was a gay kid, although I didn't know exactly what that was at that time. I knew I was different, and I knew that there were probably some aspects of being a politician or being in public life that were going to be denied to me as I was coming of age. I was born in 1966, and coming of age in the 70s and 80s, I just thought I couldn't do that stuff because it just wasn't going to be able to be something I could do and live authentically. And so teaching became the pathway for me. It also was a pathway for me because I was very shy. This is a place where Joyce and I differ. I was pretty painfully shy as a child, and the classroom and books became the place where I could really find a cocoon that was a really safe space. In high school, sadly, it became a somewhat unsafe space as I really had to deal with some bullying, and I saw some teachers that really allowed that to go on, and that was at a very key time, and it really did shut me down a bit. But the classroom was a place where I could find a home, and that really led to this pathway of teaching. And of course, I fell in love with teaching. Once I came back to Arkansas in the mid-90s, I really found my pathway in public service through nonprofit work. That was a place where I could be gay and balance my teaching life with a life in the public space. And nonprofit work was a place where I really found my home. Still thinking I couldn't do politics. Ultimately, I did run for office. It was the best thing I ever did in my life, despite losing, in that it forced me out of my shyness. It really forced me to be a different kind of person, a different kind of leader. It also helped me understand my community in a way that I really was see as so valuable, and that really was my pathway towards a more public form of public service in terms of my service on the state board, and ultimately what I'm doing now. And so that's kind of how I got here, and why we all have to find our own path. But there is a path for everyone, no matter what their skills and their talents are.
Wow, thank you. That was really awesome of you to share. And Clarice and Kwami Abdul-Bey, I know your intro kind of gave us an idea of how you got into your work, but if you don't mind still sharing how it happened, how you ended up where you are today.
Well, thank you, Megan. Shout out to AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps Vista.
You being one.
Yes, you being my cohorts. Once an AmeriCorps member, always an AmeriCorps member. So I want to shout you guys out. And I think my grandmother, I would say, was the first public servant for me growing up. She lived in one of them, well, both of them did, but she lived in College Station, Arkansas, and she was the grandmother that fed the neighborhood. So she was one of the grandmothers, because there were many community members that got together to feed the community and feed the neighborhood. So she was one of those people. So I would always see her cooking, making Kool-Aid or whatever else, walking to the store, stopping by neighbors' homes and delivering food, and I would go with her. So her name, she is my ancestor now, and I want to pay homage. Willie Mae Jackson is her name, and she was that first public servant for me that I could see with my own eyes and actually visit homes and be with and watch her work. So and then later on I started just kind of being in the community, working with other advocates in literacy and teaching students as a mentor, and mentorship is kind of where it led me. And so literacy was that area that I started really gravitating to because I love to read. And then after literacy was just gardening, community gardening, because I came from that. My father, my grandfathers, and everyone were lived in the Delta, so they were sharecroppers. And I think that whole sustainability in food came from them. And so trying to help with being involved with community gardening and that type of thing led me to pretty much where I am now, because you get to see the social determinants in low-income neighborhoods and even where I grew up. And I was motivated by those two things, which is social justice and then specifically food justice. And so all of those things came together for me. And then, later on AmeriCorps. And I thought Peace Corps at first, but I was saying, I don't know enough. I don't know enough to go to another country, so I'll just wait. And so AmeriCorps was the way. And so I did that for 2 terms. And it was social justice, and it was also food justice, which was, and again, shout out to Share Our Strength in DC, and also the local Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance and the Urban League for their part in that. So that was my path. And then it led me to, at the same time, our developing Ouachita Foothills Youth Media Arts and Literacy Collective, which, my time with mentoring young people and literacy, and then kind of meshing that with radio and other things, all kind of came together. And me meeting this gentleman here, who was also a mentor and did a lot in the community. We just kind of put our minds together on some things we were really passionate about. And so that led to all of the things that we are doing now.
And I similarly had my grandmother also as a great influence in my life, Johnny Elizabeth Dixon Moorhead, who was one of the unsung heroes of the 1957 crisis at Central High School. And I actually did not learn about her undocumented involvement with that until her funeral, where President Bill Clinton spoke at her funeral and talked about some of the things that she did behind the scenes that isn't even in the history books. So to have that background, and then I listened to Senator Elliott describe her childhood and Dr. Barth describe his. It's like I had a combination of the two. I was outgoing on Wednesday and Thursday, and I was introverted the rest of the week. So I grew up, I attended the United States Air Force Academy, leaving Central High School. And during the Persian Gulf War, I experienced some real severe discrimination there because me being a Muslim at the Air Force during a war against an Islamic country led to me being so, literally abused that I had to leave there. And when I left there, I came home and I taught 7th grade social studies at Henderson Junior High School while I worked with the city of Little Rock as one of the original members of the Little Rock Task Force for the Advancement of Youth Violence, for the Prevention of Youth Violence, I've also worked with the city on the Racial and Cultural Diversity Commission, Sister Cities Commission, and Little Rock City Beautiful. I've taught in Atlanta, I've taught in Philadelphia, I've taught in Brooklyn. And I also, when I lived in Philadelphia, I was also a traffic judge. So those are my lifelong experience with public service, and tying that into what we do with the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement. Like I mentioned, my grandmother, Johnny Elizabeth Dixon Moorhead, her brother was Lonnie Dixon that you mentioned in the introduction. And me growing up knowing what happened to him and my family not really being able to deal with that historical trauma until I started learning about the work of the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama, and deciding to duplicate that work here in Arkansas under the banner of the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement. And that has given both me and hundreds of descendants of racial violence here in Arkansas voice and opportunity to really work towards memorializing the 492 documented victims of racialized violence here in the state of Arkansas.
That actually perfectly transitioned to my next question to both of you is how has your work changed your perspective about Arkansas? And I understand that this can be said about the South in general, but as Arkansans, I want to know, like, how do you feel about living here and knowing, and like our government at the state level and local level, how has your work influenced your personal opinions, but also the direction of your program?
Well, you want to take that first?
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
I'll chime in.
Well, it's interesting. I love Arkansas. I was born and reared here, and I've lived in 4 different countries, and I've traveled around the world. And I love coming home to Arkansas. My last time coming home was just within the last 8 or 9 years. I decided to come back home because it's cheap for me to buy a house here. So we have a really nice house where the same amount of money that I was spending on a rent for a 1-bedroom in Brooklyn, I have a mortgage and a 1-acre backyard. So I really love being able to afford that. But going specifically to your question is I have a love-hate relationship with a lot of things that go on here in Arkansas. I love being able to work with people like Joyce and Jay because they get it and they understand that we have to work together to correct some of the wrongs that not only have been done, but are continue to be done so that we can have a more equitable and a more just society. And, you know, the barriers, the usually unnecessary barriers that we come up with are just, they fuel me because I just know, hey, I just got to fight a little harder to get these things done. Right now, we're working with Senator Elliott to work on some legislation that would kind of help this come along as far as creating a statewide commission that would work on studying the history that we've talked about and actually creating a educational curriculum and also ways where we can actually deal with the descendants in a more just way where acknowledging and apologizing for things that have happened in the past. And do you want to add to that?
Yes, I just quickly, I love my hometown. I love my neighborhoods and communities. Like Kwami, I think that we would be further ahead if we would just understand the importance of coming together on issues and working together on all of the things that we are passionate about, talking about, you know, I always say this, and I've said this a couple of times in recent conversations, how very important it is that if we are, there can't be enough social justice organizations and advocacy happening. There's just can't be enough areas of food justice or areas of education or literacy or whatever. Like we no matter who's doing what, we as public servants need to be able to come together to work together on things to make them happen faster. And I think that's what slows us down here. And like I said, I love Arkansas. It's beautiful. It has some beautiful life and nature and all of the things that come with Arkansas. But we truthfully have a dark history, and that history need to be, for me, I believe there needs to be some reconciliation that happens, some restorative justice that is welcomed in our state, and we need to be working on that, and it needs to happen soon, in my opinion.
Thank you guys so much. On the topic of education, I'm going to transition and say Arkansas, like the rest of America, is a complex place with complicated systems, obviously. And that leads me to my next question to Dr. Barth. How are you going to bridge, well, Dr. Barth and Senator Joyce Elliott, how are you going to bridge the education gaps within the city, which also includes undocumented students and deferred action for children arrival students, so DACA students as well?
Yeah, I'll pick up and talk a little bit about the community school work that we're engaged in, which I am. I have always been drawn to as a model because it just makes sense. But increasingly, there is now the empirical data that it has really powerful impact in terms of transforming not just the educational lives of children and young people, but also the lives of community. And I think it's this model which really puts a great deal of emphasis on the supports for students outside of their academic lives so that they can thrive in their academic lives, but also recognizes that the communities and neighborhoods that they're coming of age in also need a great deal of support if they can, those parents, grandparents, community members can really be their best, and really recognizes, to go back to the point that was just made about the state's history, that we have a multi-generational challenge when it comes to the intersection of poverty and race and ethnicity. And we've got to deal with these issues in a multi-generational manner. And the community school model really says we've got to not just work on supporting children, we've got to really transform the places where those kids are growing up so that they are no longer bogged down by the trauma that is a part of life in too many of the neighborhoods in this community and too many places in this state. And so that's, I do think it's an important approach. I do think it has to be combined with, the best teaching and learning, the most forward-looking curriculum possible that really borrows from things that we know work around the globe. But it also has to recognize the multi-generational needs that have to be addressed if we're going to make this make kids' lives the best they can be.
Well, I actually totally I agree with what Jay said, because in a lot of ways, we've just been engaged in a fairy tale response. People will acknowledge the education gap that leads to so many other kinds of gaps. And education started on a foundation of gaps. And that's what I think so many times, we miss. We start at the point kids are going to public schools and being educated, and not think about all of the things that influenced their lives before they got to the door of the schoolhouse. If the average person, like for my, I'm a parent for my child, all of the things he had to help him be ready when he entered that school are things every kid should have. But so when we get to school, we start trying to fix everything there, as we should, because we've neglected so many other things in society. And so I think for people to feel better and feel good about assuming they're doing something about the gaps, that's where I think this is where we engage in these fairy tale responses like, we're just going to create something called school choice. And in school choice, we're just going to say a nice, warm, fuzzy things like no child should be relegated to having to, go to a school that's a bad school. So we're going to come through and we're going to do something really cute and fancy and build some other kind of choice over here and say we're helping solve the problem. And that is not a criticism as much as it is I want people to recognize just because something makes you feel good doesn't mean it's a good thing for all of humanity and all of schools and all of parents. Because the problem is we can't just pick out 5 or 6 or 100 or 25 or whatever and say we've solved the problem. So to fix that gap, I would propose, from studying what's happening around the world to really turn something on its head. We need to pay much more attention to inputs rather than outputs. Because if we do all the right things like we do for our car, we do everything in the world to make sure our car has good gas, it has good oil, it's tuned up, and we do it all the time. And then we don't worry about what the output is going to be because, that car's going to perform. We do it for our cars, for God's sake, and so many other things in our lives. So in our country, we've gotten very fond of, trust in God, but everybody else bring data. And that really covers the thing that we don't want to pay a lot of attention to, I think, many times, because if we are only looking at the gap on the back end when it shows up on paper, and we know it's there, but we have not on the front end put all the things in place that you don't really have to worry about the output. But if you just look at the output, then you have some people at whom to point fingers. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. And as a legislator, I find that particularly egregious because we hold everybody accountable in terms of, well, but did you pass the test? And for years, I've thought, kind of like what Jay was talking about, if we're paying attention to all the inputs that kids need to be successful, it is so much more than a test. It is all about those lives they live before they show up at that schoolhouse. And that includes their parents, that includes their neighborhoods. Just like my child didn't have to worry about all of those things. And we're not rich by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying our priorities need to be reversed and we need to get beyond, I just want to know what the score is. I just want to know what they made on the test, and realizing that teaching and learning is so much more than a test score. And that has taken us way off course of teaching kids. Therefore, we exacerbate that achievement gap while we think we're doing something good for it. And for those folks who, I wish we would quit. It grates me every time I hear somebody say they should have a great school no matter what the zip code. Okay, who disagrees with that? But how is that a solution? And I don't want my child or anybody else's child who have to leave their zip code to have a great school. When every school is a great school, no matter the zip code, or when every child is going to a school where it's okay if your child goes to that school, well, that's when you know we've closed the gap. Is it good enough for your child? And a lot of the people making these decisions are doing this fantastical thing and saying, well, we're going to rescue these kids from their zip codes. Let's do something about the zip codes. Then we will fix it.
Wow. What an amazing response. As someone who actually went to a school outside of her zip code, I went to a private school, and I can absolutely say on scholarship that even if those students do go to these better schools or whatever, they still feel isolated based on social economic status, culture gaps, just feeling like they have to compete with their peers because they've been told that they're behind the curve in some way. So as a person who is really passionate about the education system in Arkansas, I just want to know, what does that timeline look like for y'all? I think I've realized I've gone to Hendrix College here, and I thought that would be when I realized, wow, you know, this is where even in our college system, the same systems apply. So I'm just like curious to when do you think people will schools become truly integrated? That's my question.
Well, I don't think they become truly integrated until we stop waiting on the government to make sure they're integrated. They'll become integrated when we start to realize that there's a huge disadvantage to privilege. There is a disadvantage in privilege that people don't see. It is a blind spot because this world is growing more and more diverse. And the more you keep your child away from learning in that diverse atmosphere, and it is not just color, ethnicity, it is economic as well. The more you deprive your privileged child, whatever privilege means to you, of not being in a learning environment that is inclusive of all kind of kids, you're really disadvantaging them. And when they get away from home, they're going to see another world. And what do? We deprive them. And I think the other thing that's important too is Black people have already taken the burden, and I'm just talking Little Rock schools here now because that's what your question was originally, but it's true all over. Black people have already accepted the burden and lived with it. I was one of those kids of having to be the ones to integrate the schools. So after all of these years of trying to do it mainly with the burden on the kids of color, that leads me to think we are never going to have those integrated schools so many people say they want until white parents decide, yeah, I am going to make sure my kid goes to school. I'm going to be a part of our kids being prepared for their world, not mine, because we're preparing them for our world and not theirs. So, and I just respectfully ask, stop following up what you say when you say, yeah, I really believe in education. I want integration. I want my kids to go to an integrated school, but I don't want my kid used as an experiment. You say it and you immediately give yourself an out by assuming that for your kid to be the one, or you to be the parent to take the steps and take the responsibility for once, all of a sudden your kid's an experiment. I don't think that's the way to look at it. That's not a positive thing to do.
Yeah, Megan, if I could just, sorry for popping in, but I totally agree. But I think it's not about integrated schools. It's about integrated neighborhoods. And we just can't focus on the 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., 180 days a year. We've got to think about all the other hours of a life. And I think we've really got to transform the way in which the choices that are made regarding where people live for those folks who do have choices about where they live. And I think that's where the transformation has to happen. And sadly, I do think that it's been a multi-generational creation of the challenges we face. It's going to be a multi-generational response to create the idealized world we would like, only if we are consistently moving in the right direction, rather than having what has been the case over the last 2 generations of a lot of stops and starts, getting movement in a direction because of, I think, some good things that were done through government policy and through court rulings, but then we've had a real stymieing of that. And so we haven't been able to kind of keep that momentum alive. And it's got to be an ongoing effort that really is very much at the block by block level.
Great. Pointing out that it's a community issue is probably the root of it, I think, was a great insight, Dr. Barth. Thank you for reminding us of that aspect. And I think it's something that a lot of young people want to get involved in. I personally, have conversations with my friends who live on a completely different side of Little Rock than me, and how we end up in these same spaces, but we obviously view things differently. And I think a lot of young people want to know, well, how can I help? Well, how can I get involved? And so this question is obviously open to all of the panelists, but we can start with you, Dr. Barth, if you would like, of how do you think that young people can get involved in this transformation of Little Rock?
Well, and I do. I know there are a number of younger folks on as attendees, and I know that many of them are thinking about whether their futures include living in Little Rock as for the rest of their lives. And I'm not. I think everybody on this panel has left for some period of time and then made some choices about coming back. So I'm not suggesting that inevitably folks are going to stay throughout their entire lives, but I do think that it is crucial that folks consider the possibility of making their lives in this place. I mean, if there is a constant departure from among those who have a commitment to a different kind of place, it reinforces the reality that things are going to stay, the status quo will win. And so change agents have to stay here. And I know that is challenging for a 20-something-year-old to say, I can't see myself there the rest of my life. And I get it. But I think this is a place where through common cause, there is a real possibility for creating change. I think the scope of this community, the size of this community is one where change tangible, visible change can be seen. And I do think in particular, even though there are challenges that we face to change through governmental policy, there is the power through community-based organizations to really be a source of change. And not to harp on the community school model, but I think it is a very attractive model because of the role that those community-based organizations play in serving as change agents. What we've got to help younger folks and folks of all ages see is that by working together, they really can be powerful forces in transforming their community, and it can be a really a valuable lived experience across their lives.
Wow. Okay.
Here in Little Rock, I think it's very important that everyone take an opportunity to really study and learn why Little Rock is the way it is as far as its makeup. Why is it that Little Rock is a completely different world south of I-630 as it is north of I-630? And what led into that creation? And once we understand that, then we can start, creating opportunities to serve, to correct the problem. There's a really good book called The Color of Law that I would suggest everyone read. And there's actually a little mini 15-minute movie that goes with the book that explains that. But right now, I think it's tomorrow, the city board will be voting on a resolution to start correcting that problem. And the city board needs to hear from all of the citizens of Little Rock that, yes, we want to create a racially equitable society where we all are able to enjoy the benefits of citizenship in the city of Little Rock. And what that means is that those who need the most get the most. Those who require a little bit more get a little bit more. And in order for that to happen, we have to first understand what has happened, what has led to our city being configured the way it is, what has led to our school district being just coming out of the 5 years of turmoil that it was unnecessarily put in. So once we understand what led up to everything, then we can really start talking about, okay, here's our opportunity. What forms of service can we create to start correcting that problem?
And I think I'm sorry, just kind of to add to what Kwame was saying is that if it's looked at in a restorative justice lens, through a restorative justice lens, as to what the historical background of how I-630 was split, and then if it's viewed through a restorative justice lens, through the board, then I think we could move this resolution along, and it would be something that would be taken seriously and taken to heart, in that we really do need to be viewing things, whether it's integration and community schools, and how we in our neighborhoods are still not integrated, and how on some sides of the highway, and I'll just give an example. Literally, I think it's I-630. On the north side, there is a noise barrier there.
Yeah, on the new construction.
On the new construction, there's a noise barrier that runs across the new construction. And then on the south side, there is
no
none.
Noise barrier that lets you know
there are visual divisions that are there. And if you ask the person on the south side if that makes a difference, they would say it does. And it may look like, what's the big deal to someone who doesn't live over there? But it is, and it's a visual distinction, and a reminder that we have to pay attention, and we need to be able to make laws and bills that will benefit all of the communities. And looking at it through a restorative justice lens, it's how things will be moved along and progressed in our state and in our communities.
And let's stop trying to integrate based on the way we look, and let's start integrating our hearts, because and the only way we can integrate our hearts is we need to start talking to each other and working with one another.
You know, you guys are touching on some power dynamics that I think people in the chat box actually want to discuss a bit. Dawn Ernest directed this question to Dr. Barth, but I feel free for anyone else to respond. Could you comment on how power and control, sorry, just lost the question. Oh, could you comment on how power and control will be addressed in the community school efforts, and how might power be shared in new and democratic ways? Which I think is a great question, because I think, this is Megan speaking, this is not the opinions of the Central Arkansas Library or Be Mighty Little Rock, but there's absolutely a lot of power in the hands of few people in this city. And it's actually really frustrating. And there are families who are thriving off of that, and private schools who are also thriving off of that. So how are we going to balance these uneven scales?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the community school model, which really does have as one of its pillars that that there is ongoing community, parent, teacher voice and student voice in how much of what a school does operates. That's fundamental, and that's tricky because of course. There ultimately have to be decision makers in schools. The principal, of course, has been that person historically, and I think that there is always going to be some hierarchy in any organization, but it doesn't have to be an overwhelming hierarchy. It really should be a situation in which those who are living in those schools, living in those communities, have a real voice in terms of what happens programmatically. And so it starts really with assessing the needs of that community from the voice of those who are living it. Because I think for too long we have had programs in which, folks think something will be good for a community and impose that on without the voice of that community really saying, these are our needs on an ongoing basis. And so that's fundamental to the model.
Senator Elliott, do you have anything to add?
Well, about the power of sharing, in addition to what Jay said, I think Little Rock School District really does suffer from still being under state control. And that's an incredibly out of sync power dynamic. Because no matter what parents or teachers or anybody else in the city decides this is what's best for us, this is what we want to do to move along, it can all be just vetoed by one person, the Commissioner Johnny Key. And to me, the biggest thing that needs to happen, two really big things. One is that the state returns full control to our school district and make sure we have a school board that is autonomous and can make decisions. I think that's really important. And the second thing I think is for us to boldly decide that our kids deserve to have a world-class education in this city. And no matter what else the state says, if the state doesn't want to go along with that, fine. But I don't think there's any reason for us to continue to tinker. And because we've been tinkering for years, but sit down as a city, maybe led by our chief education officer and some others, and decide what does a world-class education look like in our city, unencumbered by the big hand, the big foot of the state. And let's go build it, because it's like anything else. You have to have a plan and know where you want to go. What is your North Star? I'm suggesting our North Star needs to be world class so that our kids can contribute with the Finlands and the Singapores and the Taiwans and the Frances and everybody else of the world. Nothing else is okay because the world is just so large and so diverse. That's why I want even parents who think, you're getting the best for your child. And I don't ever question parents about the decisions they make for their kids. I just want their kids and every kid, especially as a professional in education, to have what everybody in the world can recognize as world class. Because it really is important that we recognize this world is so different for our kids. It is not what it meant even 10 years ago.
Wow. Thank you guys. Thank you, Senator Elliott, for that thoughtful answer. And thank you all for being here today. I want to leave you with one more question before we wrap up. And that is, how do you foresee in the future young people being involved in the development of Little Rock? And I think a lot of people want to know how they can get involved and also why they should choose public service. And anyone is free to answer.
I'll pick up just because my comment actually builds a bit on what Senator Elliott said. As I think about what a world-class education includes, I think one key element is really transforming how we educate about civic life. And we spend a lot of time, justifiably, trying to help students understand what their careers should be, what their vocations should be. We need to spend, and based on what their skills and their talents are. I don't know that we always do it very well, but we spend a lot of time on it. We need to spend as much time helping young people figure out how their skills and talents link to being community servants. What are the talents they have, how they can be public servants? That part of one's life is just as important. as one's career. They are both very important, but living in a democratic society is understanding how each and every one of us has distinctive skills and talents that can make our communities better and make our public life better.
I would agree with Dr. Barth and Senator Elliott. Truly, that whatever it is that you want to do, make sure that you're passionate about it. Make sure that the thing that you want or things that you want to do, you have a you just have a love and a passion for it, because and that we in our community as advocates or public servants or whatever are there to kind of help, where there are programs that will help those young people hone in on their skills and their gifts and talents in order to for it to transfer over into public service, and using those gifts and talents for public service. I think for the most part, I have always tried to, mentor and help young people understand that the thing that you're passionate about is the thing that you should do. And when you are in the forefront of being passionate about something, you're the one that should do it, because you're going to make sure that it's done. You have the most energy and thoughtfulness and mindfulness about the situation. You should be the one to create it and to make it happen. And I agree that those passions, those gifts, and those talents should be translated over to public service.
Looking at this a little bit more pragmatically from my standpoint, I always want to take the energy that was built up this past summer, and I want to look at opportunities for turning protests to public policy. And we all have access to particularly through our mobile phones, to find out what is on the city board's agenda, not just for tomorrow, but for every Tuesday going from now into the future. What is on the Arkansas legislatures? What's the committee schedule for next week and the week after that? We need to know not only what laws are being created and how they will affect us and our families and our communities, but we also need to act upon those particular laws, those particular ordinances, and contact those that we have elected to office. Senator Elliott is very receptive to listening to what her constituents and others have to say about what's going on in the Arkansas legislature. There are city council members who are the same way. They're even on the Pulaski County Quorum Court. There are elected officials that will help you to learn more and be more involved. You just have to get up, get out, and get something, and just do the work. And just know that now you no longer have the option of sitting back and thinking that life is a spectator sport. Because like Jay said, we have to grasp civic life. And until we can get the model where we're actually teaching through the schools how to be proper citizens, we have to start creating that curriculum hands-on as we go today.
Thank y'all. Senator Elliott, did you have anything to add?
Well, no, I just want to say one quick thing, because I know I really do think when we talk about civic education, and we really should teach civics somewhere not in the 9th grade, but in 11th or 12th grade, where it really matters. And I think it would be a really important thing for us to have an intergenerational component to our teaching of civics, so that young people and people who are not so young in that space where we have a class. Invite people with wisdom into the classroom so that young people are not charged with starting everything all over. And older people are not besought by their ways of thinking all the time because they have the challenge of the newness. If our democracy is going to survive, we have to be more thoughtful about how we are preparing folks to be a part of that. And a part of that is intergenerational, and a part of that is being more instructive about what we do in our schools. And when somebody says, when are we going to do it? Because we have to do this, we have to do this. It's time for us to rethink what we're doing. What we're doing is not sacred. This is pretty doggone close to being sacred, learning how to be a part of your democracy.
Yes.
Wow, you guys have all provided really thoughtful answers that I hope that the audience participants can take away, especially young people. It doesn't really matter how old you are, everyone ought to be involved in their community. And I personally want to say on behalf of CALS, the Central Arkansas Library System, and Be Mighty, we are so grateful to have dedicated and compassionate leaders within our community. I want to thank each of you for being here today. I want to thank the participants for tuning in. I hope we will continue to do the work of those who came before us. I'm sure Martin Luther King Jr. would be pleased by the amount of people who are listening today and willing to serve their community. And I hope everyone has a peaceful Martin Luther King Jr. Day and to be safe. Thank you all so much.
You're welcome.
Y'all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.